Hello, everybody, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us today for this very important and relevant topic. I'm Chip St. Clair, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at Tyson Group, and I'll be moderating the webinar for today. A few housekeeping items before we get rolling. First of all registrants will receive access to a recording of this webinar within the next couple of days, so keep an eye out for that. Secondly, we're going to keep this webinar short and sweet at 45 minutes. And we're going to reserve the last 10 minutes or so for Q&A. So please put any questions you have in the Q&A section, and I'll be sure to field them for Lance. And lastly, if you remain to the end of the webinar, we'll have some action steps you can take to supercharge your sales team. Plus, we'll tell you how you can get a copy of Lance's latest best-selling book. For those unfamiliar with Tyson Group, we are an award-winning sales training and consulting firm that empowers clients to drive sales performance through strategy, leadership solutions, and skill development. And we service some of the biggest brands in the world. We are data-driven and results-oriented. And although we don't do it for the awards, they never hurt. Last year, we were named to the Inc. 5000 list as one of the fastest growing companies in America. So, on to the reason we are here today. In this fast-paced world of sales, the art of leadership often gets overshadowed by numbers and quotas. Decoding the Science of Sales Leadership is a transformative webinar designed to shift this paradigm, integrating the principles of sales team science into every aspect of sales leadership. This session is an indispensable resource for sales leaders, managers, and C-suite executives aiming to elevate their team's performance and achieve groundbreaking results. So, to help us unpack our journey, at the journey of sales leaders, it is best-selling author, Forbes, Inc. and Fast Company contributor, and president and CEO of Tyson Group, Lance Tyson.
I appreciate it, Chip. Thanks so much for the introduction. I appreciate everybody being here. Hopefully today you'll be able to leverage some of the ideas based off our research and some of the interactions we have with our clients. And a little bit about Tyson Group, just in case this is about as much of a sales pitch as you get. We work with organizations to help them drive sales performance through strategy, leadership, and skill development solutions for their salespeople. We eat our own dog food. We're an Inc. 5000 company, which we're one of the fastest growing companies in America, and obviously let some of our credentials stand for themselves. Today, though, is kind of an interesting topic because we get a lot of sales leaders that we work with, and the question arises as it relates to data, all this information. You have AI out there. Really, what do we need to do to drive sales? And today I'm going to bring you through a little bit of a journey of perspective and framing. And I'm going to go from a macro to a micro, or said another way, altitudes. I'm going to go from a high level to a low level so you can literally see some of the landscape, and then at the same time be able to take some actions and make some adjustments. So the first thing we ask sales leaders, whether they're running a small company or they have 50, 60 salespeople with some sales leadership underneath them, who, in terms of your sales leadership and how you manage and lead salespeople, who are you at the end of the day? Are you kind of to the right, more of a thermometer, or are you more of a thermostat? Now, let's think about it this way. Okay, they both do the same thing, right? Each does take the temperature. They each measure the environment. They each can tell if it's hot or cold. There is a difference, though. While they both do the same things, they're used for some different purposes. One also does something a little bit more. And if you look to the left, a thermostat. As a thermostat, not only can read the temperature of a room or environment, but it also can set the temperature, can take in other factors and adjust the environment or adjust the climate, make it hotter or colder. We would, from an analogy standpoint, we look for leaders more to be in the thermostat area. And here's the reason why. There's so many things going on in their worlds, whether it be marketplace-driven things, whether it be a misread of the economy. I mean, I'm not sure about you. A lot of we have some clients that would say it's a great economy. We have some in some industries that say it's not a great economy or a great marketplace right now. But we do know this to be true. They're constantly having to adjust the temperature because of demands either from the market, from their stakeholders, their investors, their owners. Goals are shifting. So we really kind of laid down on this thermostat philosophy, right? Being able to read and set the temperature. Let's bring this stuff further. Um, we know right now the current landscape and out there is there's a few things going on. One is there's a new business reality. And then inside that new business reality, let's think about it. Things are changing. The competition for budgets is becoming way more fierce. We also know that there's a lot of pressure on sales leadership to develop an effective game plan, draw up the right game plan, make adjustments, and then what's it going to take to actually win? And we also know that the selling profiles changed. The ability to read the minds of the buyers can be critical. Agility, situational selling is key, and having different strategies to win is going to be really important. Now, what's that mean? Well, how we manage people, that's going to change. How we hold people accountable, what our expectations are going to be different. And from deal to deal, it might put a lot of stress on sales leadership. And as also, just to add on to that, as you're reading different data points, depending what industry you're in, leads, pipeline, marketplace, it makes sales leadership tougher. So let's dive deep into this new business reality. We find interviewing different sales leaders and different business leaders. I was doing a podcast interview with a gentleman named Brad Luttrell. He runs a company called Go Wild, and he's in early stages of a startup, and he's starting to become a scale up with his business. And it's like an online marketplace. And he says the pressure he's getting from his investors and who his customers are, because he wears a lot of hats in that business, is he's constantly being pressed for time. Okay. Now, if you can, and now what's interesting is I talked to Brad, he also makes a lot of decisions on time internally. So he's being pressed for time, he makes decisions on time. Well, this is an equilateral triangle. We're also being pressed from the marketplace, from our stakeholders, and our expectations of our people. We're asking our people also to do things faster. So time becomes important. But at the same time, we want them to do a quality job. We're expected by the marketplace to produce a consistent process. We're expected to have a predictable process that yields a predictable result. And then the third leg of that triangle, right, is money or cost, right? So think about this. The marketplace expects our product or our service, or they buy the service of our service or the product of our product. They expect it to be quality. They expect things in a timely fashion. I mean, think about the pressure that Amazon's put on people with time. We expect things right away. Time's of the essence, and we expect things in a very cost-effective way. We're asked as sales leaders, and I'd write this down if I were you. We're asked as sales leaders today to do things faster, better, with less resources or cost. Now, there's some steep challenges, right? So if we know the landscape of competition's changing, buyers' priorities are changing, if we know that the selling profile has changed since the pandemic and is continuing to change, and we're asked to draw up the right game plan with the right people, we got to put some science to this leadership, and we got to put some things in perspective. So we have those three issues going on. And at the same time, that we got to put things in a frame. And what we've done in our organization, and we apply it to even how we sell. I mentioned earlier, we're an Inc. 5000 company. We move the needle pretty quick, and we can sell. And we're asked for all of our clients when we go in, we have to really get a clear understanding of their business. And we got to look at times of what's the same in every business with every sales organization, and then what's different. We know overall productivity and alignment in the organization comes down to 7 factors. We have a program based on this. We have a book coming out on sales team science, so be on the lookout for that. And we also have a diagnostic that measures these things and benchmarks it. So I'll just kind of bring you through the story. Just hear me out. This is a frame, and these are things that are measurable, and they're things that we're being asked to do when we run a sales organization. So from left to right. Sales management, essentially, if we had to put it like a mark on it, right? That is that, and we're going to break down a little later in this talk the difference between leadership and management and where they collide. But just for the sake of this conversation here, sales management has a lot to do with your goals, your KPIs, that's key performance indicators, KRAs, compensation, all those things that you could measure. Okay. Well, then sales leadership becomes about your culture, your expectations, your experience, your behaviors and values. We just had in our company just had a mixer. We have an online mixer once a month. My team just did a wonderful job with it. We all had to introduce just to get to know each other a little better, and we constantly do it. We have new team members. We today we had to bring five famous people. What five famous people would we bring to dinner, right? And what we would serve them? Well, it's a culture play, and it's great to get to know people. I laugh every time I'm in those situations, but that's maybe sales leadership. What's your culture look like? How do you get to know them? How do you spend time with them on one-on-ones? Like, when do you break bread with them? Well, there's two things there that we're tasked to do. We're also tasked in many cases um, to look at the sales process. Do we have the right process? One of our younger salespeople, Stacy, recently won a meeting with a marketing company, and their traditional marketing firm where they'll do a lot of like traditional marketing things. Now they're starting to give advice, and they have an aging workforce, so they have some folks that aren't from retirement, and the way they used to sell is going to be different to how they give advice now. So their process needs to be adjusted. Their process needs to go from more of a transactional model sales process to more of a consultative model. Now, I'm talking about process. Now I'm also talking about sales methodology, sales philosophies that could be strategic selling, relationship selling, value-based selling. And then effectiveness. How effective is your salespeople, anybody that's involved in the sales process, account management, service folks, um, direct salespeople, business development, inside sales, whatever it looks like. How are those critical skill sets driving the sales process and methodology? Well, then that sales effectiveness next brings us to talent. And one of the things we talked about is the selling profile has changed. We know one thing to be true. We were with a sports team not long ago. We were with actually the San Francisco Giants, one of our clients. And one of the big conversations we had with them was, do you realize as a salesperson sometimes your buying profile dictates your selling profile? Well, the sales profile has changed. If people are doing that, they're applying that to it. What kind of talent do we need? Or you go back to that marketing company that Stacy was able to engage with. We're realizing that some of the talent that got them there might not necessarily get them there. And I would tell you, I've been in the training business for multiple years. Sometimes the job's not right for the person, not the person's not right for the job, and it's statistically improbable to have a salesperson that would be good at everything. And one of the things everything they would need to do in a sale, right? So you can't always just skill up the talent. Sometimes choosing the right talent. I'm going to give you a couple examples of some things we're seeing in the marketplace where you might even say, geez, that's affecting us right now. Or that is a little bit like, do I have the right people? And then how do you find it? And then ultimately, sales enablement, all this technology that drives sales. And if you go back to that money, quality, and time triangle, right? A lot of that technology will help us do some things if we use it the proper way, faster, better, with less resources. And if you have any questions as we go through this, please put them in the chat feature because we can answer some stuff directly. Chip will chime in if you need to be re-clarify. Let's continue down the story. One of the things we know as we engage with sales leaders, and we time after again hear that there's several issues to really tie this science and this data to sales leadership, what they're being tasked to do. And we call these key result areas. And what we ask many times with these leaders, look at this list. And this seems to be the more macro list that, or the things we hear time after time, and rank what's a high priority and what's a low priority, and pick three. time after time, I was talking to one of our salespeople, Brandon, and he goes, I think he was dealing with a plastics company. He said they wanted to pick all of them, Lance. And I said, yeah, but let's get them narrow down to three. That will tell us what their key priorities are. So one, if you're tasked to drive revenue growth, surpassing revenue targets through planning and execution. I do know this to be true. I've yet to meet an organization that lowered their growth year after year. I've seen it flat sometimes based off a marketplace. And then with that revenue growth, that's market share, that's approach, depending on how mature, immature the market is. Customer acquisition and retention. You know how the old saying goes, it's a hell of a lot cheaper to keep an old client than it is to get a new one. Well, what is that definition of expanding the customer base while maintaining relationships, upselling, cross-selling with those clients? One of our clients in the NBA, they're going to the playoffs. It's actually the Minnesota Timberwolves. They're going to the playoffs this year, and one of the things that they're doing is they haven't been to the playoffs a ton the last few years, and they're starting to execute on some contracts where they're having to cross sell more, and they're dealing with more of a winning product than they have in the past. And it's changed some of the relationships, changing the conversation. And we see that in all kinds of different industries. Um, Sales team development and performance, right? What does it mean to build, train, and maintain a high performing sales team? And I think high performing is defined based off of where you are. Sales management development. What does it look like if you have actually leaders underneath you, right? We're dealing with an online payroll company right now, and one of their big initiatives because of their growth is looking to develop their sales management team over the next year. It's more critical. It's almost that sales management team has to actually catch up to the growth of the organization. Pipeline management, right? What's that look like? There's so much science behind that in CRM, and typically what does that look like? What's your, one of the things we talk a lot in pipeline management is a pitch through rate. A pitch through rate is how do you get from one meeting to another meeting, and that progression through the pipeline to ultimately get to a no or yes. And if you think about pipeline management too, in a very simplistic way, a sale is many times a series of yeses in different phases. Yes, yes, I'll talk to you. You can meet with me. Yes, I'll answer your questions that you ask. Yes, you can pitch me or prescribe something to me, as I call for in away game selling. Yes, you've resolved my objections. No, yes, I'll buy from you, right? What does pipeline management look like? And then sales strategy and execution. We're seeing more and more the pressure on sales leadership and sales management to develop effective strategies that align with business goals and at the same time align with what's going on in the marketplace. So as we progress through here, let's illustrate some of this stuff a little bit more. So let's just take this for instance. Let's look at sales cycle time. So if we go back to that triangle and drawing up the right game plan, which was one of the challenges, that triangle of cost, time, and money, right? A lot of sales leaders are not only asked to drive performance through increasing sales, they're also asked to reduce the amount of time it takes to make a sale. So this is requiring, if we go back to that game plan or that sales strategy on that last bullet point, if that was one of your priorities, they're being asked to look at prospecting. And one of the things I challenge any of you on, if your sales team has to prospect, do they have a predictable, scalable way they're prospecting? Do they, do you have your salespeople, do they reinvent prospecting week after week? Are they too tied in to technology? Our marketing team, somebody that reports to Chip, we have a person on our marketing team, her name is Vinky. She found us some technology that we're using that helps with the outreach in LinkedIn, and we're executing that really well. And we've made some adjustment to how we get leads, maybe through pay-per-click and things like that. But even though that technology is good, she would tell you, if I asked her, she would say, you know what, Lance, we actually need people to execute and follow up with those. And then what does that initial communication look like? Is that initial communication, if your salespeople are tasked with both pitching and winning conversations, what's that conversation look like? Is it a live conversation? Is it a blend between, through some kind of social media, through email? and a live conversation. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, right? In the book Green Eggs and Ham, there's 73 objections. And the objection primarily through the book is I don't like green eggs and ham. The number one objection is the very first objection in the book is the objection of the salesperson. I don't like Sam I am. And that initial communication, are your people drawing people in, or are they pushing people out? Some businesses have to have a first interview to get to a needs analysis or discovery, or what we call an evaluation in the books, Selling as an Away Game. Then you got to develop a solution. We call that diagnosis and Selling as a Away Game. I use germane language here. Then we have to present. Now, do those things happen in two different meetings, or do they happen in one? It really depends, right? Or could it happen in either, right? Then the buyer evaluates. They look at the deal. Then they object. And does your sales process require your people to negotiate? And I would challenge on a couple things. Do you actually have a standard negotiation process that you can hold people accountable for? Is negotiation, we find many times it's not even built into the pipeline, and it needs to be built into the pipeline. So these are things that sales leaders are tasked to do to really blueprint the right strategy to reduce sales cycle time. Let's bring that a step further. So what is it that we have to do as sales leaders? What do we have to be better at and really good at? Well, if you look at U.S. military strategy, there was a kind of the author or the father of our strategy around SEAL teams and fighter pilots. If you just saw Top Gun recently, was a guy named Robert Boyd, and he actually built most of the philosophy and strategy around modern dogfighting, and now our SEAL teams and a lot of the American military follow it. And what their leaders are taught, and if you start at the word observe, they're taught to make an observation. It's called an OODA loop. Then they orient themselves to whatever they observe, and then they decide and act. I think a lot of times sales leaders, if you go back to those first three challenges, are tasked with coming up for the right game plan, almost deal to deal. I know, for instance, with a lot of our clients, the sales leaders are involved almost every deal to adjust tactics almost situationally. And many times leaders, I even know in our own company, our leaders are involved heavily inside the sales process. So now that's forced us in a lot of organizations to team sell a little bit. The payroll company I was talking about, they're high growth company, and because we're under an NDA at this point, I can't talk specifically who it is, but it's a fast growing company. And I will say that their managers and their ride-alongs not only are evaluating their salespeople, they're helping draw up the right game plans. And that puts stress on all of us, right? So depending on where you are in the organization, sales leadership, and how it reports up to you, this is something we're asked to do. Look into OODA loop. It's a decision-making process. It's something we encourage leaders to do all the time. That's more of a 10-foot level, but let's move the needle. Well, then let's start talking about people a little bit, right? So we assess thousands of people. I think last year probably we assessed about 2,000 people, 2,000 salespeople, maybe a little bit more than that. Somebody on here on my team, if they're listening, they would actually tell me, Lance, it's actually this number, but I think I'm a little low, so we're probably a little higher in that. And with our assessment, we're constantly looking at skills and competencies. Well, I'm not saying this is the entire list of skills and competencies. I would say this probably meets a lot of the smelt test of some of the things you're dealing with. If you had to rank your people and say some of these, if not all of these, are things that you would measure, you got to evaluate your people, right? Are they good at prospecting? Because prospecting is not only a cadence and a process, it's also a skill. Consultative selling, right? Your ability to understand needs that involves questioning, that gap analysis, things like that. Presentations. Just because people do presentations doesn't mean they're good at presentations. Can they do a formal presentation? Can they do, right now, a lot of us are asked to do formal and through technology, right? Objection handling or resolving objections. Do we have a process for that? And it's a skill, that skill of bartering, going back and forth, being very impromptu or extemporaneous. Negotiation, right? Most people can tell you what a good negotiator is or isn't, but do you have that process, and it's skill based and a competency based, and can you hold people accountable to that? And remember, if you're on here, you never negotiate before you resolve objections, because negotiations requires bargaining, and you can't bargain if you're blind, right? So many times you got to start resolving or at least addressing the objections before you negotiate. Is that built into your process? Communication skills, right? What's that look like? And formal, informal, through technology, live. I did a webinar recently, and you probably go online and find it, on fragmentation, right? The sales process is fragmented. And what's that mean to salespeople? We're having multiple conversations in different venues, maybe through social, maybe through text, email, and live, formal to informal meetings. And then if you have a larger sales team, what does managing people and process look like to you? So let's take our people a step further. Where do they fall? Right? A lot of leaders now are kind of forced to really address, where are their people? We call these performance quadrants, and many times we'll take an organization and we'll take a group of salespeople, and we'll really have to dial in with the leader. Where are your people? Are you dealing with a group of people that are non-performers? Do you have some folks that have plateaued? Now, I'm not saying it's bad to be plateaued, right? You can get consistency there, but what does that look like? Are they new or developing, right? Or are they flat out a star? What do those things look like for you, right? So let's take that performance quadrant and move into let's look at high performers for a second, right? So one of the things we called for, right, is we look at skills and we look at KRAs, and we go back to those three issues. And those three issues are: the landscape has changed, leaders are going to have to draw up plans, and the selling profile has changed, right? So with that said, Florida State in 2012 had done a study on what it took to be a high performer. And they actually did two studies. The first study was try to disprove. There's a book out there, really good competitor of ours, and I admire their work, called The Challenger Sale. And they were trying to disprove some of the findings in the Challenger Sale. And the Challenger Sale was a study that was done. And they looked at 783 salespeople from 8 different industries. And then they said, you know what, this study isn't more, we need to find more about high performers. And then they did another study of 1,500 salespeople from 3 different industries that are flat out high performers. Well, here's what they found. And this is interesting to today, because it really holds true to today. So they found that high performers had a dominant style based off the situation they were dealing with. There are clear patterns, win-loss rates, when accounting for both the situation and strategy. High performers are likely to deploy the strategy with the best odds compared to the rest of the organization at all times. And the only accurate thing you could say for a high performer is that they were agile or situational sellers. Now, here's what's really interesting. You could take this study and put it against account management. You can put it against a lot of different roles inside of sales. But what it said essentially was this: that salespeople had a philosophy of read offense, was very situational. Now, here's what's interesting about a read offense. In order to operate a read offense, you have to be really well versed in basic offenses. So to dogfight, you have to know the basics about dogfighting. They say SEAL teams, based off of study, will prepare for about 6 to 8 scenarios. Less than 30% of the time will that scenario actually happen, but success rates are usually over 80%. I think when we first did this slide, one of our most cherished employees, Sean, she's a Boston fan, and I think when Tom Brady went down to Florida, she snuck this in here and put Tom Brady there. But think about it: if you're running an offense, you call play, you have a system or a process, but you get to the line of scrimmage and you see the defense is giving you something you don't like, so you're going to call an audible. That's what these sales people are doing. Same thing on an operating table. You're going to deal with different situations with people with different conditions much differently, but you have to know the basics. So what we call for, and this is the pressure on sales leadership, what we're calling for in this read offense is or this mindset is to be adaptable, agile, and pliable, right? Because that's what's happening in the market. Well, the pressure is not as much on salespeople. And like, how do you go pick a salesperson that says, hey, they're going to be good at a read offense? Well, the only thing I can tell you, if they're going to be good at a read offense, that probably means they're pretty good at the basics. They're pretty consistent. They're probably pretty coachable, right? But it's up to the leader to draw up the play, and it's up to the leader to have the people ready to go with their offense. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. Let's bring that another step, and we have a few more slides to share before we go in some Q&A. A read offense could look like this. One of our good clients, the Houston Texans, we developed this with them to deal with some of the things that they aren't dealing with corporate partners and some of their premium seats. Do the pre-approach. What's the mindset of the buyer? That's data that we would have on the buyer, right? Information we've gathered. What's our main strategy? What are some different strategies during the play or inside the sales process? What tactics are going to drive our best results, right? That is really critical. So in order to get here, though, I think all of you, and where we're going to kind of land the plane is you need to understand there is a issue though with all of our jobs. I would sense most of you, if I asked you, are you a leader or are you a manager? Most of you would say, I'm a leader, Lance. I look at my job. But I would argue, though, all of our roles in sales leadership, if we wanted to say it's all sales leadership, we have leadership responsibilities and management responsibilities. Let's go over a few key concepts before we land this plane. And I know I have some folks that are going to ask some questions, so start putting them in the chat, or we'll kind of direct that. So in essence, though, think about it this way, just before you leave. Management's the process, your ability to plan, organize your resources, direct your resources. What I'm calling for a lot today is a lot of sales leaders to kind of direct, organize, and direct resources. Remember, time, quality, money, or cost, how to coordinate, and then where do you put your control mechanisms? Your leadership is more your vision, your communication, driving EQ, and understanding motivation. So how do we execute on those things? Well, the data landscape tells us there's we got to plan, we got to strategize, close rates, competitive data, KPIs, pipeline management, quarterly goals. So these things all require leadership and management, process, and drive people. Because all of our jobs, let's face it, our job is to produce results and develop people and produce results. So leave you with a couple last thoughts. As you leave here, are your expectations different than your salespeople's expectations? Because if they are, you will get nothing more than mediocrity. So let's look at solving some problems here. As we went through today, what's the problem or opportunity? What are some of the causes? What are some of the possible solutions, and what's the best possible solution? With that, I will land the plane, hand it back over to Chip, and we'll go over some questions. Thank you very much for your time. Chip, hand it back to you.
Thank you, Lance. Some great insight there. Yeah, we have a couple of questions. Let's see, anonymous attendee. How do I know if I'm a thermostat or a thermometer? It's a good one.
I would say it's an interesting question, and I would challenge you on this. Do you spend more time? And I was coaching a sales a leader yesterday. A lot of the words he goes, I feel I don't give my people their time, and we start to dive into that, and we were talking about like things that energy suckers, like what sucks energy from you, what gives energy for you, and he spent a lot of time talking about the attitude of his salespeople and the culture of his salespeople, and it seems like he was always taking the temperature of his people, and then we talked about some of his issues, and he has a lot of ship issues, like process issues, like ship or crew, right? So it seems like the folks that are entirely just focused on just the people side of it. And listen, I'm in the training industry. I believe wholeheartedly in the value of people. If you're a sales leader, though, you have people in process you got to take care of. So that might be one thing that comes to mind. Other questions? Thanks, Chip.
Yeah, for sure. We have another one here, and this is a good one with the difference between a manager and a leader. So should a hiring manager focus on hiring department heads with more leadership skills or more management skills? What's the easier one to start coaching?
I would say what I would ask is I would ask, um, I always ask the leaders, first thing I do, and if I would hire, I think everything can be taught. I don't believe leaders and managers are born. I believe they're developed. I think people have a tendency to have a lean. Some people lean more to the people side, some lean more to the management. Rarely do you find somebody straight down the middle. So I would, when I hired them, and there's ways to find that out, right, through different kinds of assessments and things, and they wouldn't be personality assessments, they'd be competency-based assessments, ones that actually measure both sides. I think we should all be using those things at this point. There's too much good data out there. And there's ways, and you contact our organization, there's ways also to interview to find out what side. I would first hire the attitude of the person before anything else. And then I would see where they land it and then look to develop the other side. That would be the quick and fast to that. What else, Chip?
Good advice. We have another question with a few more minutes left. What is the perfect balance between management and leadership? How do you know if you are a leader who manages or just a manager?
I don't over believe in balance. So philosophically speaking, I think it's nearly impossible. The way I would answer that is I would find out what you progress toward, right? Where's your natural lean? And first things first, right? Where's the priority? Because at some point, if you think about the duality of all your jobs, the duality is to produce results and develop people. And sometimes it's or develop people and get results and they flip-flop. So I think depending on what you need at the time, right? Like if you're behind goal, I know our VP Gina right now, we're spending a lot of time looking at game plans and how we would deal with different markets and drawing things up. That's where we're focused right now. I don't know, beginning of next quarter, that might not be that way. So other questions?
Very good. We have another question from CB. If high performance individuals align with agility, is there any reason or situation in which you would not be agile?
So say that again. Ask that one more time. I want to make sure.
Yeah, so if high performance individuals align with agility, is there any reason or situation in which you'd not be agile?
I don't know how I think if you got a salesperson that's high performance, I think a couple things are happening. Either they have an extremely good radar, they have high skill, okay, um, and they're just okay with no's and they're okay with gray. I would want to know. I would try to discover any high performer. What makes them a high performer? Is it instinct? I can't necessarily teach instinct. Are they, or are they just asking good opinion based questions all the time? Like, for instance, we encourage salespeople at all times. So, say you had a complex sales process and you had a first meeting with somebody. And I was just actually coaching a media salesperson on this yesterday. He had a big meeting with Marriott corporate, and I said, they know who you are. I would probably ask them what got them to take the meeting and what don't they want to hear, what do they want to hear. I want to know how they're high performer. So I want to dig into that so I know where to coach them, because I think the coaching situational. I think today, and not in every industry, you kind of have to be agile at some level, right? Because most people, most industries are required to at least present in a way that feels tailored to the buyer. So I don't know if I answered that question, but I can kind of see the angle. I think that's a really deep question. Thank you.
No, it is. And we have a couple more minutes left and a couple more questions. So
Okay.
this is a short one, probably with a long answer. What is a reasonable cadence for one-on-ones?
Um, we I would say a reasonable cadence is biweekly. I think some overdo it, but I think it's like kids a little bit. You give the time. I'm into, and what we recommend is treating giving a fair amount of time, not an equal amount of time. So fair cadence would be who needs it, right? Not everybody needs the same amount of one-on-one time. So I would say that. And then inside that, I'm really big on people managing up, and that's our whole philosophy. We like our folks to more drive that. what the agenda is. So you want your people coming in and driving that conversation as opposed to you driving it every time. I see sales leaders work really hard in sales meetings and one-on-ones, and it's just like a sales meeting. I don't know. One of our philosophies is the salespeople should bring their pipeline and their narrative to the meeting. You shouldn't be bringing the whole pipeline to the meeting. So I think a good cadence would be, you know, bi-weekly would be the max I would go, depending on what you have to manage. If you're managing 20 people, I mean, you may have to rethink that. I mean, I'm going off of managing 6 to 8 people max. So
No, good question. Or good answer. We have one more question here, and this is important because you're actually going to be working on a few articles for Forbes and Fast Company and Inc. on this. What are your thoughts on the emerging technology of AI and how that affects sales leadership and management? Does it hurt or help?
I would say to all of you, don't be the last of the buggy whip people. There's just not a lot of buggy whip salespeople out there. I go from organization to organization. I know my trainers do too. I'm just baffled. I mean, I was at a pretty prestigious brand 3 weeks ago, and they don't want their people using AI. And I said to the leaders, I go, why? Is it a legality thing? And somebody says, I kind of feel they're cheating a little bit. It's a tool. Look, I think I think your people should be using AI. I mean, I use AI. I tell my instructors to use it. I think it's a way to learn. It's not the way to learn. Some people need pictures. Some people are inquisitive, like ask questions. It's a piece of it. So I think they should be using it because at the end of the day, you could have AI write you the best elevator speech, impact statement, or credibility statement, but the salesperson still has to deliver it, right? They still have to deliver it. It's just you're just going to get answers, right? It's going to save you time. But I would go back to the time, money, quality conversation. All of you are asked to do more with less. And if I can get data points quicker to apply to a sales situation and research, why wouldn't you do it? I don't understand what the argument is there. So don't be the last of the buggy whip people. So Chip, I think we have an offer. If that was the last question, so let me kind of go back. So
Yeah.
if you can kind of, not an offer, but a suggestion, right? So
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. So, if you want to contact us today to realize the full potential of your sales team, you will get a copy of Lance's #1 Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling book, The Human Sales Factor, immediately following a consultation with one of our expert sales consultants. And you'll get access to exclusive content also designed to help your team achieve their goals. So we're going to make this webinar available to you within the next 48 hours. And if you have any questions at all, reach out to me at chip.stclair@tysongroup.com. Thanks for joining us today.
thanks, Chip. Appreciate it. You can contact me here and listen to our Against the Sales Odd podcast or connect with us online, Twitter and LinkedIn. So appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you.